A clash in the final laps between the two McLarens and a post-race protest against winner George Russell added some late controversy in a very revealing Canadian Grand Prix weekend, so here's everything we learned from Montreal. Max Verstappen's proximity to a race ban was a major talking point all week in Canada, and George Russell made sure to take advantage. Verstappen really didn't appreciate that his potential suspension was subject to so much discussion, or that Russell was wading in at every chance he got in a continuation of the feud that goes back to the end of 2024. Russell kept gently goading Verstappen off track in Canada, including a remark that "I've got a few more points on my licence to play with" when discussing the prospect of going wheel to wheel with his rival into turn 1, with both of them starting on the front row. When that context was mentioned to Verstappen in the post-qualifying press conference, he gave a cutting response, saying it was really pissing me off to keep hearing about it, a waste of time, and very childish. That response seemed a sign that Russell was getting under the skin of his rival, and he got under Red Bull's too. It became obvious during the safety car period at the end of the race that Red Bull feared Russell was trying to bait Verstappen into doing something stupid when Verstappen's race engineer Gianpiero Lambiase urged him not to fall for the gamesmanship. And Red Bull's post-race protest accusing Russell of being unsportsmanlike, which was dismissed by the stewards, had at least a hint of desperation about it. So this wasn't just an emphatic display of performance from Russell to take his first pole and win of 2025, it was a successful exercise in winding up his opposition. Another Lando Norris mistake, another big bout of self-criticism, and while sometimes Norris does himself a disservice, this was an occasion where it was entirely justified. The immediate recognition over the team radio that crashing out of the race was all my fault and stupid from me, having driven into the back of teammate Oscar Piastri trying a move that was never on, was honourable, and Norris continues to display good accountability. But the rate of mistakes is just simply too high, and Norris's frailty is costing him the championship. He made 2 errors in Q3 that dropped him out of pole contention and left him 7th on the grid, and that late blunder meant instead of potentially trimming the gap to Piastri even more had he got past, it ballooned to 22 points, almost a race win's worth. There were inevitably questions about whether McLaren's right to let its drivers race, how this could have been avoided, and if Norris has shown he can't be trusted. The most significant takeaway though is that it's further evidence that Norris is making too many misjudgments when it counts, and Piastri's grip on their fight, and by extension the title battle, is only getting stronger as a result. The 2025 Canadian Grand Prix now stands as one of Mercedes' very best results in the ground effect era. Only the 1-2s earned by Russell and Lewis Hamilton in Brazil 2022 and Las Vegas last year are a better finish than Russell's victory in Canada being backed up by Kimi Antonelli in 3rd. Antonelli, who is now F1's 3rd youngest podium finisher in history, didn't have Russell's pace in qualifying, but was still 4th on the grid, then jumped championship leader Piastri through the opening corners. And in the perfect response to the rut Antonelli's found himself in recent races, he showed no sign of the tyre management or race pace issues that undermined his last run near the front in F1 back in Miami, which, combined with Russell being so strong out front, could hint at an important step for Mercedes. The team reintroduced the latest version of its rear suspension in Canada, having parked it for the previous 2 races. This features a lower inner pickup point for the upper wishbone's forward leg to improve the car's aero and mechanical platforms. It was introduced to Imola but dropped immediately in the wake of some uncertainty about its performance impact, as both drivers had awful tyre usage and race pace. Mercedes was confident on review that it had exaggerated its tyre management weakness with setup choice at Imola, and scoring a double podium with the upgrade back on the car in Canada, where track temperatures hit 50 degrees, gives the team a confidence boost. But it is slightly caveated. As team boss Toto Wolff pointed out, this track lacks the high-speed corners where Mercedes typically suffers more in the heat, and the smooth track surface is kinder on tyres too. Is Aston Martin's upgraded AMR25 now F1's 5th fastest car? It looks that way, at least in Fernando Alonso's hands. His qualifying results since the car's big development a few races ago are 5th, 6th, 10th and now 6th again. Thanks to Canada, Aston Martin is now quicker than Williams and Racing Bulls on average since Imola, and in that time is the only team to have a better super times average than in the 6 races prior. This was despite concerns that the Montreal track would expose the car's poor aerodynamic efficiency. Having waited so long for his first points finish of the season, like London buses, Alonso's second score came immediately afterwards, this time with a brilliant and assured run to 7th. The downside for Aston Martin was the other car's performance. Returning from a 1-race absence caused by the pain in his hand and wrist, Lance Stroll was confident that a procedure to deal with the problem following the previous race had helped. And it was normal service resumed, but not in a good way, as his disappointing qualifying form continued. Stroll never looked like getting on Alonso's level after a costly FP2 crash and got knocked out in Q1, then had an anonymous race at the back as a result. Canada proved to be another of those what-if events for Ferrari, as it was left ruining what should have been a much better outcome. Ferrari was under the spotlight from Thursday after Italian media reports that team boss Fred Vasseur was under pressure to turn things around if he was going to have his contract extended. So things couldn't have got off to a worse start, as Charles Leclerc had a chassis crunching crash in FP1 and missed FP2. Then, just as he looked to have got things back on track by qualifying and had set a purple opening sector in Q3, he made a mistake that he blamed on Isaac Hadjar's dirty air, which derailed his lap and left him too far down the grid to do much damage on Sunday. Whether or not Leclerc's requests in the race for a one-stop strategy should have been heeded and Ferrari left a better result on the table is up for debate, but a perfectly executed weekend would have been a strong one for the team. Lewis Hamilton enjoyed a cleaner weekend to end up 5th on the grid as Ferrari avoided the aero drop-off issues in practice that have clouded previous events. But his own hopes of getting near the front in the race were ruined when he hit a groundhog early on and the damage robbed him 20 points of downforce. Vasseur said that Ferrari made too many mistakes collectively from the beginning of the event, which unfortunately is now a key theme of Ferrari's season. Yuki Tsunoda has 3 pointless races in a row for Red Bull, despite being back up to date now with his car specification. Tsunoda's been missing a new floor compared to teammate Max Verstappen ever since his big crash in qualifying at Imola, so carried older components through that race, plus the Monaco and Spain weekends. Red Bull managed to bring new parts to Montreal that were on Tsunoda's car by final practice, and he showed a more encouraging turn of speed, but still wasn't particularly quick, and he ruined his own weekend anyway. Tsunoda narrowly missed out on a Q3 appearance, which would have been his first since Miami in early May, but was almost half a second slower than Verstappen in the process. And he had to start last anyway because of a 10-place grid penalty for overtaking Oscar Piastri during a red flag in practice. Tsunoda was unhappy with what he called a ridiculous grid drop, but it was his own fault and a needless complication. More disappointing though was a pretty limp race from the back and watching the likes of Esteban Ocon and Carlos Sainz grab points on the same strategy as him just because Tsunoda simply wasn't quick enough to pass them. Williams' peaks have been so high this season that while having both cars in the top 3 in FP1 was a mirage, practice still seemed legitimately strong, 4th and 7th in FP2, then 9th and 10th in FP3. Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz never looked like anything other than serious points threats until it fell apart across qualifying and the Grand Prix. Albon started 9th but had a poor start, then was bullied off the road on the opening lap by Franco Colapinto, while Sainz was 17th on the grid after a Q1 elimination because he was impeded by Isaac Hadjar, so both cars ran outside the points early on. While a one-stop strategy starting on the hards allowed Sainz to steal a point, a grumpy Albon was compromised by Williams not listening to him wanting to cut the first stint short. He then needed to run even longer to make a one-stop work, which cost him even more time before an engine problem eventually forced him to retire. A solitary point means Williams is on quite a meagre run over the last 3 events and is coming under more pressure race by race from improving rivals. Its hold on 5th in the championship is still strong, but not as secure as it once looked. The group of teams behind, now headed by Haas after Esteban Ocon finished 9th on the same strategy as Sainz, are chipping away at the gap. What might help Williams is they are all taking turns to score bigger chunks of points, which will make the margin harder to eat into. Alpine's pre-season promise has turned to dust this year. It's now cast adrift in last in the championship with just 11 points, 9 behind Sauber. Sauber's Barcelona upgrade package has given it the performance it needs to contend for points. Nico Hülkenberg followed up his remarkable 5th place in Spain with 8th in Canada, a drive that was actually very similar to the one he delivered 2 weeks ago, just without the boost of the charge on fresh tyres after the restart. This all leaves Alpine looking a bit shaky. Once again, points should have been possible in Montreal. Franco Colapinto ran 10th early on but was shuffled back thanks to strategy and a lack of pace, while Pierre Gasly had the speed to have threatened for a Q3 place before a red flag contributed to his elimination in Q1. Most concerning for Alpine is its weakness in battle, because the package is not built for combat thanks to its power deficit and less efficient ERS harvesting. On average, it's had the 7th fastest car this season, but that's only been turned into points on precious few occasions. Finally, one name nowhere near this race was a major talking point in the Montreal paddock. It's not Ed Straw, but he's here to explain what we mean.
One of the big talking points here in Canada was something happening over 5,000 kilometres away. That was Robert Kubica winning the Le Mans 24 Hours. Of course, Montreal, the scene of his famous one and only Formula One win back in 2008 and that massive accident the year before. There's a huge amount of love and respect for Kubica in the paddock here in Formula One. They know how incredible he is. They know the astonishing story of his comeback. Kubica himself downplays the lingering injuries, the after effects of that crash, but make no mistake, what he's had to go through to get back into racing, let alone be able to win the Le Mans 24 Hours is absolutely astonishing. So much respect because of that. Fernando Alonso quite rightly called him a legend of our sport a few minutes ago, and he was right to say that. He has a huge amount of respect for Kubica as well, and has spoken to him a little bit about the Le Mans 24 Hours. He said he'll give him a call tomorrow, let him enjoy the victory, and then bother him tomorrow to say well done. So Robert Kubica, a long way away, but very much in the thoughts of the F1 paddock today.